Welcome everyone to our remote Q&A with Alan Cooper and slight levels of comedy connection. I'd like to start by thanking, let me get my notes. So I'd like to start with thanking Sydney Uni, who's given us the room and a bit of foundation. To Zoran and his team for connecting with Ellen and bringing a, pardon my French, shit ton of equipment in order to get this happening. We will be recording this for posterity and we'll be throwing it up on the IxDASydney website as well. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people who are the traditional custodians of this land, and I'd also like to pay respect to the elders past and present of the Eora Nation and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present. So again, thank you to University of Sydney, thank you to SIFT for arranging for it to be recorded and transmitted and connected for posterity. Thank you to my partner, Katya Forbes, who is the other half of IxDASydney, and to everyone else who's wearing a t-shirt today to help you find this room. I'll just do a little bit of a quick intro to Alan, because the main point of this is to have your questions to Alan. So what we'll be doing is having you come down and talk to Alan directly on the screen so you can get a little bit of face-to-face, so it feels a little bit more personal. And so Alan is widely recognized as the father of Visual Basic. He's also known for his books about face, The Essentials of Interaction Design, and The Inmates Are Running the Asylum, Why High-Tech Products Drive Us Crazy, and How to Restore the Sanity, of which I've got a question about that if no one else does. Alan founded Cooper, a leading interaction design consultancy. He created the goal-directed design methodology, pioneered the use of personas as practical interaction design tools. And this year, Alan was inducted into the Computer History Museum's Hall of Fellows for his invention of the visual development environment in Visual Basic and for his pioneering work, I was up at 4 in the morning, in establishing the field of interaction design and its fundamental tools. So I would like you all to please welcome Alan Cooper. And we do, yes we do. We have Alan up on the screen. My suspenders.
Thank you.
You know, of course, that suspenders mean something different in Australia?
No, what does they mean in Australia?
Won't go there. I'm not going there.
Okay.
But let's put it this way. They're not in the same place.
Wait, are you talking about these things physically, or are you talking about the word suspenders?
Oh, those things, yeah.
Oh. And so if I come to Australia and I wear these, are strange people going to talk to me on the street saying things I don't?
No, you just probably don't want to call them suspenders.
Okay.
Well, maybe in some clubs, I don't know. Anyway,
That's it.
I digress. So the point of today is really for people out there to come down and ask Alan some questions. I have a couple, but... Yes?
Something just went wrong with the sound. The sound just went goofy all of a sudden.
Can you hear me?
No.
No?
All I'm hearing is roaring and hissing.
I've got power.
I think it's his speakers. You can hear it coming out of his mic.
We can hear it coming out of yours. Could it be you accidentally muted?
It's unlikely. I hear it.
Low 5.
might want to try again.
Oh.
No, you can hear.
Yes, I was on mute. Yeah.
I'm not going to hear you yet. Oh, there he is, back. That works.
I can hear noise, but not words.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but there's
Okay.
just a whole bunch of noise. So something was working up until we talked about suspenders, and then all of a sudden it went bad.
Murphy. So so we've got two in here. Everything looks square. Let's try. And if you can, let me know if you can still hear me. You just got some added sounds. Is that right?
I can get about 60% of what you're saying.
Shall we reconnect?
Can we try hanging up and calling again?
Hang on, let me try another mic and see if that's a problem.
Oh yeah, it might be a mic. There's something just all of a sudden went bad.
Is this any different? Is that any change?
Sounds much better.
Okay.
Much better.
Let's do that. It's probably the wireless mic, which I'll get rid of now.
Yeah, I think there was some, yeah, that's better.
So, I guess the first question I wanted to start with, while we wait for people to come down with their questions, is you had a piece a little while ago called Conversational UI. And I think it was titled, Alexa, Please Kill Me Now. And in that piece, you were talking about recognizing words is not the same as recognizing meaning. So, what do you mean by that?
I don't know. Oh, yeah. I think, so first off, let me just say that there are, we're making tremendous headway in the world of voice recognition. But, and frankly, we're probably making headway in the world of meaning recognition. But I think that what is in people's heads, people have been saying this for a long time. People who should know better have been saying for a long time that computers and software are going to get easy to use when we have voice recognition. And that's stupid and wrong. We just want to make that clear.
You get sound effects, excellent.
Yeah. So, I'm not saying we shouldn't have voice recognition, but I think that this notion that somehow interacting with a computer using voice is somehow going to be easier or better or clearer or faster than interacting with it through pushing buttons, I think is fairly silly. And I do think that you can, okay, so here's where voice recognition works really well. Siri, set a timer for 10 minutes.
Roger that. T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
Okay, that's a pretty good use for voice recognition, and that's pretty amazing. And 20 years ago, that would be considered mind-boggling. Okay, but what that is a very very tightly constrained vocabulary with a very tightly constrained field of a semantic field. And beyond that, it's not really useful for much. And there's a fundamental problem in the voice communication interface. And it's the exact same problem that I talked about 25 years ago about metaphoric design, which is that when you use metaphors to communicate in visual interfaces, which was so exciting to so many people so long ago, and has largely been proven to be problematic, because you, if you have a metaphor, a visual metaphor for saving, you know, like a floppy disk, what happens is you forever hook yourself backwards into old technology, okay? And you forever, when you create that metaphor of, you know, a floppy disk means save, what you're doing is you're saying the behavior of the system is going to behave like a floppy disk. But when you want your saving behavior to be more sophisticated than a floppy disk, and keep in mind that anything is more sophisticated than a floppy disk, what happens is your metaphor is communicating the fact that it behaves like a floppy disk. Okay, it's what you want to communicate is it does the saving part of communicating like a floppy disk. But what you're communicating is it behaves entirely like a floppy disk, and it doesn't. And so all of a sudden, for one cheap hit of recognition, you get a whole bunch of false inferences in the metaphor. Metaphoric design is a very cheap kind of design communications, and it's very much like taking drugs, you know, in that you get a high and then you pay for it the next day. You know, when I go out and drink, I hurt the next day. Now, I'm not saying don't drink. I'm just saying that don't think it comes free. And I'm saying that metaphors are the same way. And I'm saying that voice recognition is the same way, because when you use voice recognition, what you're doing is you're saying, I recognize your voice and I understand what you're saying. And software doesn't recognize your voice, and it doesn't understand what you're saying. What it does is it recognizes a tiny slice of words in a specific context with a very narrow meaning. Okay? And anything outside of that meaning gets confusing. And as soon as you want to say, you know, hey Siri, start the timer 10 minutes after I hang up the phone, and Siri says, sorry, I don't understand what you mean, all of a sudden now it's going to take you longer than if you just push the buttons. So I'm not a big fan of conversational interfaces. And I know that there's billions of dollars being spent on this right now, and it's a huge deal. And, you know, and I think what's going to happen is what we're going to find is the same thing in so much of technology, which is that they're going to find that the easy things become easier, and the hard things remain still problematic. Now, there's one other point that I want to bring up here about conversational interfaces, which is when you say to somebody, are the chickens ready to eat? Okay, there's ambiguity in that, right? Now, I can read ambiguity on your face, Joe. Okay? Now, but when I say the chickens are ready to eat to a computer, it's really problematic for it to register ambiguity. Okay, because it's not saying, I'm sorry, Alan, I don't understand what you mean. That's not registering ambiguity. That's stopping the proceedings with idiocy.
Yes.
Okay.
Is Jackson ready to meet? In other words, yeah, even just the phonetics of that communication can be the problem.
Yeah. So what happens is the trap here is that you'll say something to the computer and you think that that it has understood you. and in fact it has, or it has misunderstood you. And what this does is this is injecting ambiguity, confusion, and uncertainty into the man-machine dialogue. This is a very bad thing, okay? And I don't think it's something that we want. I have spent the last 27 years working on clarifying the man-machine dialogue. And there are many ways to do this. Some are weak, some are strong, some are good, some are bad, some are widely used, some are ignored. Believe me, voice is not one of them. That's what I mean by Alexa, please kill me now.
I'm certain you've seen the loop where someone has Siri and Alexa engaged in a looped conversation where they keep setting appointments for each other.
No, I haven't, but that's not hard to imagine. By the way, does anybody in the audience know about this, the photograph in this My Medium post here? It's a scene from the movie The Conversation.
Yeah, the one, it's Gene Hackman, a fabulous film.
Good, okay, you know it, I'm a happy guy then.
So that and Antonioni's blow up showing my age like a boss.
Yeah.
But those are older films about communication and misunderstanding when people imagine that, well, it's a recording, so it must be true. It's on film, so it must be what I perceive. Continuing, or should we continue with the conversational UI? In terms of communication, I might make a very spurious connection between that and one of your threads about should designers code. And Kat has just buried her face in her hands. In terms of that, you mentioned communication being, empathy being the important part of that. And yeah, now Siri won't go away. Which is great. Now I'm back in my notes. And the other one was, you also mentioned, though, a cry for help. That it was programmers expressing a cry for help. Maybe you could expand on that a bit.
Well, the whole should designers code question is, okay. If you heard a building contractor say, should architects pour concrete? What would that tell you?
Yeah, that's a problem.
I mean, what that would tell me is that the building contractor has his head wedged. I mean, it's one thing for a building contractor to say to an architect, these are terrible plans, okay? It's another thing for an architect to say, you need to do my job. I mean, what that tells me is that the building contractor doesn't know how to do his job. And that's what I think is going on, is I think that in general, the people who build software don't know how to build software. I think this is a widespread problem. I think that it's like.
Your timer worked.
It's been 10 minutes. Let's say that you put too much sand in your concrete, okay, and your buildings keep falling down, okay? It doesn't matter whether the architects know how to pour concrete or not. The problem isn't the architects knowing how to pour concrete, okay? The problem is that It's the concrete workers don't know how to make concrete. So what's the failure rate for software today?
I don't know. I would say quite large.
Yeah. What's the failure rate for pouring concrete today?
Well, there you go. That's provable because they test that.
So, look, what we do is we write a lot of code. And most of it we throw away. The overwhelming majority of the code that we write, we throw away. And some small portion of it ships. And the day it ships, everybody screams bloody murder. It's always wrong, it's always offensive, it doesn't do what needs to be done, it only has a half the feature set, it's hard to use, everything's obscure, and then people tweak and tweak and tweak, and they go where they put oil on the squeaky wheel. And we end up with software that is almost software looks like a polished turd. Namely, it's not very good, it doesn't do what we want it to, but most of the most extreme pain points have been kind of covered over or rounded over. Okay? The problem here is that we do not know how to build software. One of the #1 reasons why we don't know how to build software is that the people who build software don't know how to include an awareness of how the user fits into the equation. You know what I mean? Is the person whose role it is to represent the user is the interaction designer, and the development organization does not know how to integrate the designer into their organization. And, designers don't know how to integrate into the organization either. I don't want to come across as a guy pointing the finger at programmers and saying, what a bunch of screw-ups, because I'm not. What I'm saying is the entire industry of software construction doesn't realize that it has a horrible problem and it's not doing anything about it. And that problem is that we don't know how to do our #1 job, which is build software. Okay, we have crazy notions that, maybe slicing up what we do into tiny little bits and doing it faster and having meetings while we stand up instead of sit down is somehow going to make it better. It's like, what's the best thing about Agile is it says, maybe we don't know what we're doing. That's what's good about it. Everything else about it is really freaking goofy, if you ask me, except maybe pair programming. And pair programming is the one part of it. It's the first part of it that gets kicked to the curb by developers. Okay? So, what are the most important things in the world of software? I ask programmers this, and they don't know the answer. There's just, it's the, somebody said this. They said it's software development is managed by people who don't know how to do it and done by people who can't manage it. And so the idea that somehow if designers can code is exactly a cry for help. It's developers saying, we're screwing this up because we don't know what we're doing. Why don't you fix your shit? And designers who are, look, there's a second problem going on here. Okay, and the second problem is that there's a bunch of designers coming into, there's this huge need for designers in the industry. And all these companies are hiring like crazy. IBM says, we're hiring 1,000 designers. IBM doesn't say, we're hiring 1,000 competent designers. Okay? And so what happens is a lot of people stand up and say, well, I was a print designer, I'm a designer. I draw pretty pictures, I'm a designer, And so they come in and they do design, and they make bad smells all over the place. And what happens is programmers and managers say, well, maybe if you learned how to code your stuff, you wouldn't be doing such crappy design. And these designers say, yeah, I'll do that. Or what they do is by the time you're doing CSS, you're done designing.
Yeah.
And, so I think what we have here is that we have two problems. Number one, I think there's a lot of designers who aren't really designers. Not by the way I define designers. And there's a lot of developers who are unaware that their process for creating software is shit. And in the middle of this, you get people saying, well, maybe if designers could code, our problems would miraculously go away. You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of people saying, oh, well, we've got voice recognition interfaces and conversational interfaces. All of our problems will go away. So here's the thing, is I give lectures all the time. I stand up and talk to people about my current talk, just for example. My current talk, I gave it 3 days ago in China, and I'm going to give it 3 days from now on the East Coast. It's called Working Backwards. And half the people come up to me afterwards and go, oh, Mr. Cooper, I loved your talk. I'm going to go home and tell everybody about thinking backwards. I didn't say think backwards. I said work backwards. Okay. Now, these are humans I'm failing to communicate with conversation. And not only that, but I have big slides up on the screen that say working backwards. And I have 88 slides in my presentation. And probably a third of them say work backwards. And they still think I'm talking about thinking backwards. So I'm not trying to insult people. And I'm not trying to...
Don't hold back on it.
What?
Don't hold back.
Honestly, it is incumbent on you to be good at what you do. People come to Cooper and they... look, when Cooper Professional Education started, which was the very first place where you could go and you could get practical instruction on how to do interaction design. In 2002, we started doing this. We took an internal class that was 2 weeks long, which was a survey. It was a whirlwind introduction. And what we did is we compressed it down to 5 days, and we offered that class. And people screamed bloody murder because 5 days was too long. Okay, it meant they had to fly to San Francisco and from San Francisco on 2 weekends, and it made them crazy. So we cut it down to a 4-day class, and people said, well, that's too long, it's really hard for me to do it. So we cut it down to a 3-day class. And now people think at the end of 3 days, they think they've learned how to do interaction design. I think it takes 3 years.
I have some questions here for you. So I'm going to let someone grab my seat, and I'm going to wander around. And if you could come and have a seat here, then you can talk to Alan directly.
Oh, grab a seat.
Right here. I've warmed it for you. Maybe just say hello, give us your name, and...
Hi, I'm Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
Oh, hi, Alan. Nice to meet you. I'm, I guess, a freelance UX designer. I really love what you've been speaking because it's really resonating with what I've also been thinking about over the last couple of months. But I guess my question that I had was, in your recent Medium post about the endless battle, like you describe how prototyping and then the test approach is making solutions more design-centered rather than user-centered. And in reading through the comments, which were really fascinating, one of them what struck to me was, is the growing need for organizations of software companies to rapidly build and ship affecting this mentality? And what can we do to kind of resolve this, knowing that people like businesses want to ship fast, they want to get things out the door because demand of users is instantaneously. So.
Well, thank you. That's a good question. So when somebody in your organization comes up and says, I'm a complete freaking idiot and I don't know how to do my job, so I want you to also be a complete freaking idiot and not do your job, what's the right response?
I guess the thing is, I find that designers, we have a tendency to kind of be adaptable and amiable. So I guess for me, I end up trying to understand them and work with them. But I would like to say, you know, back off. You should be able to do what you know what to do. But like, we kind of built that way to say yes. Like, how do we work with you rather than against you?
The thing about people with empathy is we also have fear. You know, and we're humans, we have fear. And when people tell you to do something that you know is wrong, our empathy and our fear tells us, oh God, I gotta do what he wants me to do even though it's wrong. You know, we think we'll do the right thing by doing what they want rather than doing what's the right thing to do. That's not your job. Your job is not to do what people tell you to do. I mean, it used to be back in the industrial age, that was how companies worked, is there were a few really smart, intelligent people who were college educated, who were all men, and they all worked in corner offices, okay, in the office building. And they figured out what they were making, and they figured out how to make it, and then they told a bunch of people who were mostly men, many of them men of color, some women, they were not as well educated and nowhere near as well paid, and they had really shitty working conditions, and they worked in the factory, and they did what they were told. Okay? The industrial age is over. And the people who make stuff these days are people like you and me. And we have our hands on the work. And management who's off there doing finance and meeting with people and talking about possibilities and thinking about strategy, they are not in touch. And they don't know how to do this. And they're probably no better educated than we are. In many cases, less well educated. Okay? And they don't know the right thing to do. And many of them are still stuck in that old management paradigm where they think their job is to make the decisions and to tell us what to do. And they're wrong. That's not their job. Okay? Now, they have plenty of important work to do, most of which they don't do, which is figuring out the direction that we should be going and what our long-term goals should be. These are really important because practitioners tend to not know what their long-term goals are. Okay? And the thing about long-term goals is you have to talk about them in the short term. As I used to say, if you put off long-term thinking, it becomes short-term thinking. So, look, when people come and they tell you, I want you to, just build it, you don't need to go out and into the field and interview users. What you do is you just look at them and you say, I'm not going to do that. Okay, now the decision's in their hands. They have two choices. Okay, and what they're going to do is they're going to either A, trust you, or B, not trust you. Now, are you going to work for somebody who doesn't trust you? Why would you do that? Why would you work for somebody who doesn't trust you? Sorry. Now, yeah, tell me your answer.
I was just curious because I think that building trust does take time. It takes time to, I guess, earn, but then quickly gets destroyed when you make a mistake. It's kind of hard in that space of rapid speed of delivery that, how do you earn that trust when humans don't always easily trust instantly.
Yes, but the reason why development is done rapidly is because they don't know what the hell they're doing and they're scared. The last thing you want to do is do rapid development. Rapid is bad. Going fast is really harmful. What we're doing is we're building really complicated, sophisticated stuff that has significant implications on how the world works. It has unintended consequences. It lasts much longer than we think it does. If it's not successful, it just goes away and nobody gives a shit, okay? But if it is successful, it sticks around for much longer and it has much greater effect than you thought. Okay, and if what you have to do is you have to hammer your stuff together and put it in front of people to see if it's worth a damn, then it's probably not worth a damn. Okay? What we need to do is we need to slow down, take time, think through what we're doing, and build it and design it very carefully and take the time that it needs to do that. And when people want to hurry up, it's because they're really shitty at their job. Okay? Now, I'm not an advocate for going slow. I've been an entrepreneur all my life, and I want it done yesterday. Okay? And the way to get it done yesterday is to slow down. Okay? Because otherwise, you get it done tomorrow, but it's crap, and then you have to live with that crap. And you don't want to do that. So you have to take as much time. Don't take a second more than the time it takes. But don't take anything less. I'd rather take a second more than a second less. You know how it was? It was some famous guy, it was like Abe Lincoln, you know, said, if I've got 4 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend 3 of it sharpening my axe. And that's what we need to do. So I wrote another blog post about people's misunderstanding of Agile. And I do believe that managers think that Agile is about going fast. And I think, and they've sold that to a lot of programmers. And I think that that's because the job of manager has really changed in the last 25 years. And it went from being a fairly easy job to being one that's really, really difficult. And I don't think that that is taught in schools. And I don't think that's passed down. I think that the senior managers we have today are baby boomers and, you know, Gen Xers who are still reliving the glory days where they got to come in and make decisions and tell people what to do. And everybody looked at him and said, oh, he's the big manager. You know? And it's like, it's time to just move beyond that. And I think that all these forces that are telling us you know, we can go faster, we can just fling stuff together, we can prototype and we can test, and we don't have to go out in the field and listen to users, we don't have to do analytical work, we just have to, you know, get some prototypes up and then we'll see where people complain. They just don't know how to do their job, that's all. They just don't know how to do it. Now, I don't think they're bad people. You know, I don't think they should be punished. But, you know, if somebody's in a position of responsibility and they're saying stupid things like, let's go faster, then somebody needs to come up to them and say, you know, you really look stupid when you act stupid, so stop acting stupid. Do not take my advice. I give terrible advice. I say things like tell people they're stupid to their face. Do not listen to me. But what you have to do is you have to translate what I'm saying into something that's more socially acceptable. Figure out a way to say no to people. I say, fuck you, no. This is why I work all by myself. You know, it's because I've narrowed the world down to those people I can get along with. But keep in mind that what I'm saying is correct, even though I'm very I'm anti-social about the way I say it. You know, so don't take me literally. But of course, you know, it's like thinking backwards and working backwards. People are going to go home and they're going to say to their boss, screw you, Alan said so.
I was thinking the same thing, actually. Try not to get that mistake again.
Thanks, Alan. We've got a couple more questions queued
Okay.
up.
Jenny, good luck.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Jenny. If you want to introduce yourself to Alan and bring your question.
I'm too short, sorry.
There is a, hang on, write down.
Sit down in the hot seat.
Thank you. Hi, Alan. This is Amethyst. I know my name is very difficult. So I have a question in regards to your conversational UI, which is a very hot topic. And there is lots of article about and lots of feature like natural UI. So we know actually, as you mentioned, companies pump billions of dollars in conversational UI. And as I understand, you don't see that as a very good, maybe, thing that in future we will use it. So how you can see, for example, mixing the natural UI and conversational UI. The other day I read an article about natural UI because call to action, and as you said, for example, those sort of like metaphoric iconic, like for example, right now I can see there is an icon for camera, maybe in the next 10 years no one knows what is camera. So for example, if we want to use like a natural UI, where you can see in future we mix them with conversational, we use them separately, and how we will use them. Do you have any idea how we will use them?
You said natural UI. Did you mean natural language UI?
No, I mean exactly natural UI. For example, like clapping. You clap and you can see the interaction on in the interface. There was an article in Medium. See, Medium has a clapping feature. You have to click it to show that you have clapped. But there is a feature that if you clap in the real world, it shows that you like that article. So this is that sort of like a feature, like for example, you just doing this sort of thing and something happened, or the other day there was like a guy just controlling with hand like a drum. So it means he using his body as like a UI instead of just having a traditional UI, which is like an interface, you have a call to action and those sort of things, but you use your body for UI, for a controller.
Okay, thank you. So look, I have 28 tabs open right now. Okay, which one am I clapping for?
That one that's open.
What's that?
That one that is open.
Yeah. Okay, I have several of them open at the same time. Which one am I clapping for?
So maybe we can't do it now, but in future, this is why I'm asking you how you can see it in future. Do you think it's a good idea that company pumping billions of dollars in this sort of UI, which is something that they believe that would be something awesome in future?
Yeah. Well, let me put it this way. There's a lot of money to be made taking money from those guys doing that stuff.
That's actually my plan.
Good. Then do it. So look, let's say that I'm using Photoshop and I'm arrowing and I'm moving a thing. Okay? I think it would be really reasonable to be able to, in the middle of moving, dragging with the arrow, just kind of stop dragging with the arrow and say, 2 more pixels to the right and 1 up. Okay, and have Photoshop recognize that and move the image, 2 more pixels to the right and 1 up. That would totally make sense to me. I think there's a role for this. Okay, but the generic notion, that our software somehow is going to be easier to understand because it's listening to our voice, I'm not buying, and I don't think it's because of voice recognition. I don't think voice recognition is the problem. I think the problem is that I don't think there's any focus in the software. Well, I just called up. I have some medicine that I have to take, and I just called up today to refill my prescription. and I got into a voice tree, you know, and it didn't work. The voice tree stuff works about half the time, okay? The only reason why that voice tree stuff works is because the companies that put it out there don't really care about you and figure that it's okay to not care about you and to not give you what you want. And if you have to do something 3 or 4 times, or if you end up having to drive in to get your prescription because the phone thing didn't work, they don't really care. Okay? So there's a lot of money to be made. People are making money off of that. But they're not making money by being nice to you and giving you good services. They're making money because they're cheapening their services and they're spending less. Okay? And I'm not a fan of that. And I'm not interested in supporting that. I don't believe in it. So look, let me go back and answer your question about conversational UI or natural language. I know I can see I'm really frustrating you, Rachel, and I'm very sorry because I understand that this is an area you work in and you think it's wonderful because every day you go and you move the line forward, and you know that's fine. Keep doing that. Look, I sit down and write at my computer on occasion, and being able to talk to my computer and having it recognize my natural language as data entry is actually a very reasonable use of speech recognition. You know, that's convenient. I could sit here and just talk and it would type everything out. And then I could go back in later with my keyboard and type and edit it. That would make sense. This is one of the things that natural language is pretty good for, entering words into your computer. But the thing that it's not very good for is entering commands into the computer, because it's filled with ambiguity and uncertainty. Okay? So I don't see it as having a big role. It's like fire the photon torpedoes. You know, you don't want a voice interface for that. You really don't. You don't want to have a voice interface on something that it's like, bring the photon torpedoes back. That's the Admiral's flagship, not the enemy. You know, you really don't want to have uncertainty in that dialogue. You know? Now the thing is if what you're doing is you're telling Siri to set a timer, or if you're talking to Facebook or something, it doesn't really matter. Okay, but a lot of what we do on computer systems matters. And I know there are people who think that we're just getting better. That with neural nets and faster computation, what we're going to do is we're going to get to the point where you can say to the computer, you know, well, I need you to, you know, go get that document that talked about so-and-so and put it over here, and then I'm going to have this meeting later on and all that stuff. I know that's the fantasy vision that people have. And I don't share that fantasy vision. I mean, it's like every conversation with every robot or every computer that's, you know, from HAL, from Space Odyssey to her. It's all the same thing. It's you're talking to the computer and it's understanding you. And when I talk to my wife, she doesn't understand me. What makes me think that we're going to talk to a computer that's going to understand us? I just, you know, maybe it'll happen. You know, I know that what's his name? The singularity guy. You know, he thinks it's all going to come together in the next decade. All of a sudden, these systems are going to be smarter than we are. I'm not buying it.
We've got another few questions for you, Alan.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Arietta. Very good to meet you, and thank you. Thank you for your contribution to the industry, your books, your Medium posts, which I have enjoyed as much as this talk. It is cathartic. And very topical for me right now. I've got a million questions, but I'm going to use one that someone tweeted yesterday, a guy called Cameron Rogers. And he asked, saw the term PX used today, funny face, hashtag PX, UX, CX, SD, UCD, HCD, ED, IXD. What have I missed? What have we missed?
So, wait, those are all initials of organizations, right?
They're our jobs, apparently.
Ah, jobs, yeah.
Jobs. People experience, user experience, etc.
PX is a thing?
Apparently now.
Right. Okay, so remember I've talked earlier about you know, software, about building contractors saying that architects need to pour concrete is a sign that they don't know what they're doing, that the building contractor doesn't know what he's doing. Okay. So this alphabet soup is an indicator that we don't know what we're doing. That's what it looks like. You know, is everybody's jockeying to find some differentiator. You know, some way of saying, well, our way is different, our way is better, and you know, we're not doing interaction design, we're doing user experience design. Well, we're not doing user experience design, we're doing service design. You know, and you know, we're doing. The thing is that where we're headed is away from user-centered design towards designer-centered design. And I think that the essence of what we're doing here is not about us. We are the user's desires are vouchsafed with the design community. And I hear a lot of people talking about their creativity and their vision. And I don't hear a lot of people in our profession talking about their users. You know, what they do is they go out and they observe the users, and then they come home and they create a couple of posters, they pin them up on the wall, and then they do whatever the hell they want to do. There's a real disconnect there. And it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, they say, well, we've got a new way of doing it, and I am calling this user lean experience agile design, you know, whatever.
Okay, next question then. It's a good segue, and unless anyone's going to take the microphone away. One more. How do we? One more. Okay. How do we get the rigor back?
That's a really good question. How do we get the rigor back? A lot of the responsibility for that is in academia. And academia has a real issue with this. And the issue that it has with this is that what we do is craft. And academia hates craft. It loves the study of. Okay, it loves being at arm's length. It loves the idea of, well, they're doing this, and this is what we can see about them, and this is how we can slice this salami into 1,000 tiny paper-thin slices, okay? And what we do is we get down in the mud and we get dirty, okay? And in order to do that, you can't teach it in a classroom. You have to teach it by doing. And you can't teach it by being a talking head, like I am now. Okay, so none of you are learning. Understand that. is that the way you're going to learn is by doing it. What you need to do is you need to go and learn how to use how to make things out of wood or metal. Go take a semester at a vocational college, how to be a journeyman woodworker, or go take a class in wood turning, or go take a class in metalworking, or take a class in, there's all these maker spaces popping up. That's a good way to go, is learn how to make something with your hands, because that's the work that we're in, okay? And it's really exciting to me to see that maker spaces are making inroads on campuses, because they're getting people acquainted with this notion of craft. And although I don't see the penny hasn't dropped yet. Is it the universities understand that they need maker spaces, but they don't understand yet that means that that's how interaction design is done. It's done the same way. They still think that it's prototyping and testing. Prototyping and testing is how you learn how to do what we do. It's not how you do what we do. You see that difference?
I do see the difference. I'm trying to work out how to lobby it. Here's the next question.
I think this might make you a little.
Thanks, Arietta.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm aware we're eating into your time, Alan, but if you're okay with that, we've got one more question.
Hi Alan, my
Sure.
name's Ian. I'm a freelance designer as well. Sorry for this face ID to kick in. There we go. Okay, there's a movement gaining pace to put more focus on the ethics of design. This is in the context of contemporary digital products, particularly social networks and media, competing in what is being called the attention economy. Have dark patterns and their ilk always been a dilemma for designers, or are ethics worthy of increased discourse today? And have your ethics ever clashed with the interests of a client?
Say that last sentence again, your question, that last.
Have your ethics ever clashed with the interests of a client?
Sure. Yeah, they clash all the time. Mostly they tend to clash on issues of practice. Namely, they want me to go fast instead of going good. That goes right to my ethics. Because going fast is often how you make things that are bad. I think that, thank you for this question. I'm teaching a class at the University of California in Berkeley. It's called Thinking Like a Good Ancestor. And it's very much about this. The idea is that I don't want to talk about the E word because it's a dirty word, and people think that if you're not a sexual predator, then you're ethical. But I think that it's much more deep than that. Evidently, there's nobody ethical in Hollywood or Silicon Valley or Washington, D.C., based on that rubric. So what I want to do is, see, it's this deja vu thing. So 27 years ago, I started going around and saying, we've got to make software easier to use. Everybody knew we had to make software easier to use. I wasn't the only guy. Everybody said that. Even Bill Gates said that. And because we knew that our software was hard to use, and we knew that was a problem. The challenge was, how do you do that? Nobody knew how. Nobody had any idea. We knew software that was easy to use, we kind of recognized it when we saw it, but we didn't know why. And we didn't know how to make it that way in a generative sense. We knew how to evaluate it after the fact. Okay. So we now know that we need to create ethical software. We need to create software that lets us be good ancestors, that doesn't borrow from our children and their children and your children. Okay? How do you do that? That's the hard part. How do you do that in a generative way? I don't want to be standing here and going, Okay, so 14 years ago, a guy in college wanted to scope out the hot babes in his dorm, so he put together a piece of software that was so successful that it has allowed the leader of a foreign nation to suborn the entire presidential election of the United States of America, which is what has happened. Another way to put it is, this cool software for checking out the co-eds at Harvard has allowed the United States to lose the first battle of World War III. Okay, fought on Facebook. So recognizing that after the fact isn't of interest to me. I mean, it's of interest to a lot of people in the Justice Department. You know, I think that's a good thing. But what I want to know is, how do we prevent that from happening in the future? So this is what I've been working on. And I found 3 things that are mechanisms by which unethical stuff can creep into your product development process. Okay? And one of them is assumptions. We make assumptions. We always make assumptions. Oh yeah, this is, you know, the people who use my device are going to have skin this color instead of skin of a different color. Those are the kind of assumptions that we make. Okay? And it's those assumptions are the places where unintended consequences and bad ethics creep in. So what we need to do is, as we're working, we need to be constantly asking ourselves, what assumptions are we making? It's a mechanism for, in a generative manner, figuring out how to not be evil. Instead of just saying, don't be evil, nobody shows up at work and says, today I will be evil. Everybody shows up and says, I'm working on this really cool face recognition stuff. Okay, some guy comes in and says, look, I can connect the face recognition stuff to this thing, and then I can find out, then I can figure out this, and all of a sudden you've got evil. Okay? So what you have to do is, as you're working on your cool face recognition software, you have to be asking yourself, what assumptions am I making? Okay? Now the next thing is externalities. You have to be saying, an externality is something that you push out of your world, either by choice or inadvertently. Okay? And you have to be saying to yourself, what are the externalities? And a lot of people do that. They say, well, I'm building this really cool product, but I don't have to worry about the fact that the people who are using this are going to have to violate laws or hurt their friends in order to use it. Okay? And you go, well, that's not my problem. Well, that is your problem. You have to at least be aware. You have to make these externalities, you have to make them intentional. Otherwise, they just come back and bite you in the ass. You know? So this is externalities, knowing what the externalities are. It's like you know, a factory pumping water out of a river to cool its machinery and then pumping the hot water back in. All the fish die. That's the factory is saying, well, that's an externality. It's not our problem. That's the fish's problem. See, but it is our problem. So that's a second vector by which the ethics of the products we build degrade. We create externalities. The third one is time. We look at the time scale, and what we do is we say, this thing is only going to be around for 5 years. You know, or, you know, I'm only funded for 3 years, so that's all I'm going to think about. But the fact is that a few years from now, people are going to be stuck with that. I mean, Apple does this all the time, is they say, we don't have to worry about connectors. You know, we don't have to worry about old connectors. We don't have to worry about new connectors. We just keep changing the connectors every year because a connector to us only has a 3-year lifespan. Okay? Their time frame is too narrow for us. Most people want to keep their computers longer than that. And these are mechanisms by which this bad thinking creeps in. Another one is you have to look at, you have to say, who benefits? Who benefits and how do they benefit? And who loses and how do they lose? who are we disenfranchising when we're saying that, oh yeah, I've got this really cool thing, you know, I can go into Starbucks, you know, and I can buy my latte with you know, Apple Pay. Okay, well then there's a guy sitting on the sidewalk with a shopping cart. He's the guy who loses because nobody ever carries cash anymore. What we need to do is we need to start thinking about these things in order to not be evil. Because just saying, oh, the corporate slogan is do no harm, these are the companies that are doing lots of harm. And the thing is that it doesn't happen at the level of the corner office. It doesn't happen at the grand strategic level. Because the grand strategic level says, let's have people buy their coffee with their phones. Nothing wrong with that. You know, that's a good objective. The evil creeps in at the level at which we build the stuff. These are the hands that create the evil. And what we have to do is we have to take the responsibilities. Because the people who are doing the grand strategy, they're moving forward and they don't recognize it. So it's interesting, you know, the analogy that I use is my father, who has been gone for over 30 years now. He was a union electrician in San Francisco, California. And he fought in the 1950s for the union, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And the reason why he fought for them, because it was the right thing for America at the time, okay? Because he fought for the 8-hour workday, and he fought for health benefits, and he fought for disability. He fought for good working conditions that were the right thing to do, okay? And he fought for them for himself, but he fought for them for his fellow workers. That's what the unions said. Okay, well, unions are not such a big deal. Today, my friends who work for Facebook are getting paid way too much, and they have way too much free food, and they're treated like some kind of royalty. You know, they've got people come in and do their dry cleaning and, you know, give them pedicures while they're coding. So they don't need a union for working conditions. But what they need is they need a union for what's important in the world today, which is not building digital products that oppress humanity. Okay? So, well, it's the moral equivalent of a union. And the thing is that management wasn't about to institute the 8-hour workday, and they weren't about to give workers a disability pay. Okay, the workers had to fight for it. And the same thing is true today, which is management and owners and the finance guys are not going to say, okay, guys, it's time to start building ethical software. They're not going to do that. Okay, we're going to do that. If anybody does it, it's us. It's the practitioners. It's the people who get their hands dirty. We're the ones who are going to do that. And we're going to make management do it. Because they say, well, it's in our corporate bylaws that we can't be evil. You know? But that doesn't work. There's ample proof that that doesn't work. Thanks. It's a really good question. I appreciate it.
So in the
Look forward to reading more from you in future about that. Thank you. Excellent.
So in the information age, you're talking about designers being the new moral leaders. How did I know your dad was in a union? That clearly comes through.
I like to say, you know, the future is going to be a lot more like 1750 than it is like 1950.
Yeah.
You know, I think that it's rather than going more industrial, we're going to be more pre-industrial, and so ethics becomes more of a personal thing. So who is that? There was somebody in there.
Oh, this is Katya.
Hi, Katya.
Nice to meet
Hi,
you.
Doc.
I'm the timekeeper for today's session, and we have gone over time for you, and I really want to respect the time that you've given to us, so thank you so much. And I feel like the university would also be excited for us to go out of this room on time. So I'll leave it to Joe to wrap up.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And very much so for us, Alan. So thank you very much for taking the time and the extra time for speaking with us today. And thanks to SIFT and to Zion and Sydney University for giving us the room and everyone who showed up. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again later. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you.
So Joe and I will see you at Interaction in February.
Oh, good. Yes, I'll look forward to it in the freezing cold. Brrr.
I know, what the hell is up with doing the February conference every year? Like, that's my holiday that I take every year, and I always end up freezing somewhere, like New York.
Well, we wanted to be here, but there you go.
We're working on it. We're working on bringing it to Australia. Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.